Greetings, good citizens and patriots, from the heart of the Republic. We come to you this, the 10th day of May in the year of our Lord 2014, as a matter of necessity in our efforts, with your help, to keep a running record of events as true to the facts and data as our knowledge and capabilities may allow us to deduce. To those within the sound of my voice, let this record stand and be heard in a matter of accountability, where it may be necessary for such a record to be referenced. We stand for the Constitution. We stand for the free market. We stand for the American way of life. And we, as good citizens, being obligated to do something, have chosen maintenance of this record as our something. And we thank you for listening.
Hi there. We'd like to welcome everyone to this week's That's It, I've Had It. I'm your host, John, and with me as always is Michael.
Yes, Miguel.
Michael, this week, what is it that you have had it with?
This week I've had it with the economy. 4 specific things I want to cover. The stifling taxes, the shrinking labor force, the stifled entrepreneuring middle class, and the issue of a national minimum wage, federal minimum wage.
Okay. Well, let's start with taxes. Everyone seems to not want to pay taxes, and I'm sure most people that are listening to this have had it with paying taxes as well. So what is it you've had it with taxes?
And rightfully so, we've had it with taxes. We have, for the past 100 or so years, been paying taxes that we didn't have to be paying. The fact that our tax bracket stands to, let's take a look at the world, right? We have one of the worst economies that we've seen in a long time. We have the highest corporate taxes in the world, the entire globe. Think about that for a minute. It is more expensive to do business in the freest country on the planet than it is to do business anywhere else on the planet. That alone should make people question what their government's doing. We have a confiscatory tax policy that takes from those who earn and gives to those who are either unable or unwilling to earn. The unwilling part is the place where we have a lot of strife, because everybody says, well, we have to cover everybody that doesn't have. Well, that's true to an extent. I don't want to be heartless, and I certainly understand that there are people who need, but I don't think that the tax policies should reflect a lack of recognition of the fact that there is far too much waste. Far too much waste. If we can even out the tax liability, because take for right now, all right, let's look at the fact that everybody in America pays 30% of taxes.
Now, earlier you were talking about corporate taxes. What do most corporations pay percentage-wise on taxes?
Anywhere upwards of 55-60%, depending on what you're doing, what state you're in, what city you're in. So as an individual,
as opposed to a corporation is paying a little less than double of what an individual is paying in income taxes.
Give or take, yes.
Okay.
That's now, on top of that, the individuals that are running these corporations are paying income tax on their incomes. So the government is pulling taxes out of almost every point at which business is done, from the production of raw materials, to the procurement of raw materials, to the production of raw materials, to the distribution of the product that's all put together.
So essentially we're getting a double dipping on a large, massive scale.
We're getting like 6 dips, depending on what industry you're in.
I'm sure that's something we could actually go into more depth to at a later date, but let's get back to the overall of excessive taxing, like you were saying in the beginning.
Right.
Excessive taxing with corporations and on individuals.
Right.
Well, if you were in power, how would you go about correcting this or putting a solution to the issue?
Historically, we can take a look that tax cuts equal economic growth. You go back to Reagan. When he did it, it was amazing. We had one of the biggest economic booms. When Coolidge did it in the 20s, we had the Roaring 20s.
What would be the most recent massive tax cut that spurred economic growth?
That was the Reagan tax cuts. We haven't had a tax cut that, well, Bush put in some tax cuts but he brought them back to a level that was far removed from the Reagan cuts. The Reagan cuts spurred so much growth that we actually didn't know what to do with it. And now we've got now, because we made so much of that wealth, the government's come in and felt it necessary to take more of that from those who are actually generating the revenue. What they're trying to do is take, and Fred Thompson gave me this reference. He said they're trying to take water out of one side of the bucket to pour it into the other side of the bucket. Doesn't make sense, and it's not going to work. It's the kind of shim sham stuff and moving money around that's been toppling this country for the last 40, 50 years.
So start going with what you were saying about the taxing or overtaxing of individuals and us being taxed at a rate of about 30%. I can't help but think that also goes into one of the other points you were just bringing up about stifling an entrepreneuring middle class, a middle
Absolutely.
class that's wanting to go out and go into business for themselves, be their own boss.
Absolutely.
How are those two things working together?
Well, the entrepreneuring middle class and the corporate taxes are they kind of coincide, okay? Because if you raise taxes on business, the entrepreneuring middle class who's now unemployed as a result of higher corporate tax rates that have negated labor and created the largest, the largest unemployed section of our workforce in the last 35 years. When you're taking more money from them as a means, usually through regulations, is how it's done. The EPA, the Bureau of Land Management, the city bureaus that take regulatory monies. The cost of compliance is actually upwards of $100 billion a year for American businesses. Now, not all big corporations are paying all that money. There are more small business people who are paying a greater chunk of that money because, well, they have to. There's more of them, right? So my proposition would actually be to level out the taxes. Like I said, if you create a tax rate across the board that everyone pays at one point of consumption, you eliminate the special status, right? The deductions and the special dispensations you get for doing this, that, or the other with your money.
Like as a taxpayer, the special loopholes that I hear of all the time.
Exactly.
Is what you're referring to. Okay.
Now the problem is you eliminate them for the individual as well as the corporations. The individual, there's a lot of stuff that's been in there for a long time with the.
So if we can't all get the loophole, then none of us get the
exactly.
loophole.
That
sounds pretty fair to me.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Sounds pretty
so
fair
if we
to
close
me.
the loopholes, we cut it flat across the board. Everybody pays 10% at either consumption side or income side. We widen the tax base, i.e., we have more people paying taxes, so we have a faster increase in the revenue. Whereas right now we have the top 50% of earners paying all of the federal tax bill, and we have a very unstable wealthy class in this country who's losing wealth at a rate that's been shocking, quite frankly. It's been pretty stunning. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's been shrinking.
I find it interesting that you say that, because I would think that most people would want to argue with you and say that the upper earners in the United States have actually been gaining more money, and the lower earners in the United States are earning less.
Here's how they fool you.
I'm sure everyone would agree that a flat tax rate across the board helps everybody gain money, and most everyone would agree with that. But if a flat tax rate happens, how is that going to help the lower incomes still gain more money,
right?
And not so much the hires?
If the people who are like creating products or giving out services, all right, have to pay more to make those services or products available, they're going to charge the consumer. Right, we cut those taxes out. They can drop their prices to consumers. Now, there are some consumers who will pay some taxes now, but the offset of how much they're going to save as a result of the shrinking tax liability of businesses will offset what they're actually going to pay in their taxes. Okay, so right now, like I said, we're giving 30% of our money in taxes. Everybody gives 10%. You're going to save, literally. Even if you are in the bottom half of earners that don't pay federal income tax, 30% of your income goes to gas tax or non-consumable tax or prepackaged food tax, stuff like that. You're paying taxes. About 30%.
Taxes are an inevitable thing. I think everyone can agree.
Going to pay them.
They're inevitable. We can't go without paying taxes.
Right. We dropped the overall liability to about, say, 15%. I cut your tax liability in half. You keep double what you keep half of what you were paying to the government every year. That equals to about a sixth of your income. A sixth of your income is going to be saved. How much could you do with a sixth of your income?
Oh, I can do a lot more with the 6 more of my income.
You could save some, right?
I could save. I
Maybe
could take
put some in a healthcare account, pay for your own healthcare.
possibly, or even afford myself some luxuries that I've been skipping out on for the last few years because I just
Absolutely.
can't afford them anymore.
Which is, if people have to provide those services and products to you, right? That's creating jobs. You just created jobs by participating in the market. So overall, we cut tax liability. We make it a better environment for businesses to thrive. If businesses can thrive, they can create jobs. If they can create jobs, more people can work, more people can have money.
Which I think would actually tie into one of your previous points of, so if we can lower the tax liability for businesses, therefore they're not having to charge per product, per unit. It's a cheaper, not so much a cheaper product, but a cheaper priced product,
Right.
more accessible by
Just
the
the
people.
cost of sale is lower. The cost of production and sale is lower.
So therefore, it's more accessible to the working citizens of the
Exactly.
of the republic, but also by cutting these overheads, if you will, on such businesses and such. I think this goes into what you're talking about, a workforce a dwindling workforce that we've had
Absolutely.
for going on 3 decades now.
Yeah.
But now these companies, since they're not having to pay out as much, you're saying that they can now create jobs.
Absolutely.
To get this workforce back out working again.
Absolutely.
Because last I checked, in this nation, it's not the American way, sit on your couch and collect your check from the government. It is to get out there, go find a job, earn a decent wage, have some pride in what you do with yourself.
Take ownership of what you earn.
So with these tax cuts, we can start getting into this labor force that is basically stagnant,
Absolutely. So
but
if
is wanting to get out and work.
Right. So if the entrepreneurial middle class right now that is trying to be entrepreneurial, that can't because of the stifling tax codes, right? If we reduce those taxes, we allow them to go create jobs on their own. These are the people that are going to open up little shops, all right? That are going to open up little barber shops, little barbecue restaurants, or little tire shops or whatever. These are the people that are going to do those businesses and make money at it.
See, I don't know about yourself or our listeners out there, but me as a person, as I'm going out through my daily errands and necessities and such, as far as keeping the car maintained, haircuts and all the little things that we do as people in the world, I personally prefer going to the smaller, more mom and pop style places
Because they care.
and because I feel like I get a better value for my dollar.
Absolutely.
9 out of 10 times, the people that own and operate these businesses are people that live in my community. I like the idea of the fact that I'm spending my dollar, I'm getting, 1, a quality product or a quality service, and 2, I'm spending my dollars to go to people who live in the same community that I am. I'm recirculating my monies back into the same community of which I live in, which I think is
And that's
something
with a third of your income being gone right now. Imagine keeping another sixth of it. Imagine how much more you could do.
that I could give back to. Absolutely, that would be a
kept,
wonderful thing.
if you kept another sixth of your income for like 3 years, you'd have enough to start your own business,
Quite
right?
possibly, quite
that create jobs. It's economic law at its purest. It's economic laws at its purest. Inevitability of human action. Man will do something to make himself more comfortable. Inevitably, you cannot stifle the human spirit.
Well, if anyone's ever been outside when it was cold, or in the summers in Texas when it's super hot, you don't hang around for long. You start finding a cool place and a cold beverage really quick.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yes, sir. So we can, with lowering our tax rates, not only on our individuals but also corporations. The plumber Joe, if you will, that has been made so famous in the last few years, by lowering their tax rates, we're putting money back into citizens' pockets. I mean, granted, yes, also money's going back into those companies' pockets as well. But with that money going back, they're able to free up their expenditures, so therefore they can create jobs, and quality jobs at that. Not just jobs of pushing a broom at minimum wage, but a quality job. And citizens themselves are able to earn a better living, have a better quality of life, and move on from there. I think I just hit on another one of your points that you're also wanting to bring up as well, and that's minimum wage, national minimum wage. Let's tell me some more about that.
All right, the national minimum wage is the ultimate self-licking ice cream cone. Okay, so the more you raise minimum wage, the more valuable those jobs become, which means the more valuable the employee that you hire has to become, right? So if we raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour, all right, we would have to make sure that the person we're hiring is worth $20 an hour in order to make it worth us actually spending that money.
Now, before we get too deep in this, I want to go ahead and cross on this one real quick, though. You're not against a national minimum wage, is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm absolutely against the national minimum wage.
Okay,
it's an artificial inflation of labor costs.
But
remember that cost of doing business we were talking about? A national minimum wage is an artificial inflation of the cost of sale.
But now, correct me if I'm wrong, the minimum wage was instituted several decades ago, but back in the early 1900s, because you had individuals out there that were working for essentially pennies, while owners of the corporation took all the profits and pocketed them and never dispersed them across their workforce.
That's true.
So, are you saying that business owners are now not as corrupt as they were in the early 1900s, or?
I'm saying it's much more difficult to be corrupt now. We live in an age of technology, right?
So our checks and balances is a little bit more on par than what it was.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So in the 1930s, we also had horrible work environments, right? It was steel, it was manual labor, it was 80 hours a week, right? The difference between then and now is not just an environment of work. It's actually the character of the people who are doing the work. Because imagine you live 1920s, 1910s, right? You come over here fresh off the boat from Italy, like my family did, and you have to find a work. You have to do something. So you don't mind going to work 80 hours a week because you get to keep the money that you're earning. Because we actually had a much less confiscatory tax code back then. Taxes were about 5%. After Coolidge took over and cut everything. It was genius. Again, the roaring 20s, right? You're allowed to keep that money that you're earning, so it's not as difficult to feed your family, right? It's not as difficult because when you're in Italy, you're in one of these fascist or communist countries in the 1920s, they take everything you have and then divvy it up amongst everybody. So your labor means nothing to anybody, because if you don't work, you still get your cut. It's the downfall of socialism, communism, right? Free market said keep the money. And people kept the money. We had unions come in to improve work environment.
I'm glad you brought up unions, Mike. So unions come in, they improve working conditions. I don't think there's any argument against that one.
No,
unions have done that well. Unions also basically also got these workers that were in there working in steel mills and textile mills and do these industrial jobs for next to nothing, but they were happy to have the nothing. They got them paid honest wages for the actual labor that they were doing.
Absolutely.
But the unions back then seemed very much a necessity to get the ball rolling, to get these things going. But here now, this day and age, I've heard some grumblings about unions, and that almost it's. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that a union is almost in the modern day as ineffective as affirmative action.
Absolutely.
Where affirmative action was put into place to break down racial barriers, to get people of minorities into a working position, out there getting jobs and such, where nowadays I'm not saying that racism is now gone and defunct from our society, but it's surely not as rampant as it was 50 years ago. So that's why you see many states and cities that are now no longer participating with affirmative action. Would you agree that it's probably time for people to no longer participate with unions or workers' guilds?
Not necessarily, all right, because the current form of unions that we have are political groups. They're not actually organized, an organization of citizens or an organization of people who have political interests and agendas and execute those political agendas on the backs of the workers by promising them things that will ultimately eventually topple the companies, which we saw with GM, which we saw with Mopar. The unions had such a hold on these companies, and their workforce was worth almost double what any other workforce was worth in the same industry, in car industries. It was ridiculous. There was no way they could sustain it. There was no way the labor cost and cost of sale was actually going to keep up. They toppled these companies. It wasn't the workers that did it, it was the unions that did it. The unions organized the people in order to gain power. They used that power to influence politics, to start tightening the screws on businesses and make them. Okay, so essentially what they did was they took money from the rich, or they made the government take money from the rich to give it to the poor. Not organically, but by force. right? So instead of being a union of the people and going out to the people in the community and saying, okay, this company in your community that's operating is doing bad stuff, they went to the government body politic of the city and said, this company's doing stuff bad, you need to regulate them. Which again, was the organic way would be to go out to the people and say, hey, this company is doing something, we need to get band together and do something about it. Because I guarantee you, you tell a whole bunch of people, but it takes legwork. You tell a whole bunch of people that somebody's pumping them in the butt, and they turn around and they find actually somebody's pumping them in the butt, they're going to turn around and make whoever's pumping them in the butt stop doing it. But instead, what they did was they got behind the person that was pumping in the butt in the first place and started taking their piece of it. And now what we have is a big train of people just taking from each other and putting it in their pockets and putting their thumbs in their ears and going, we got all the money. Meanwhile, the proletariat or the worker class, they're out of jobs. How many people are unemployed in Detroit? Detroit at night is dark. Detroit at night is North Korea now. It is bankrupt. The unions literally bankrupt, the biggest municipal bankruptcy in the history of this country, and we have spent a lot of money. That's saying a lot. It is dark at night. They are absolutely destined. That's what unions have done. Now, an organization of the people, an actual organic organization of the people, like the Tea Party. Oh my goodness, an organic thing that led from people banding together and wanting to work towards one cause, and it worked. They swept the House in the 2010 elections. They swept it. Now, granted, some of the guys they put in there flip-flopped and started doing stupid stuff, but that's, par of the course. Statistically, that's going to happen. All right. Bottom line, we have to reorganize our tax structure to be economically beneficial to everybody, rather than making it economically beneficial to those who put money in government pockets and making it impossible for the entrepreneurial middle class to do business. The enforcement of those regulations is done by the government, and they are done at the behest of giant corporations who have lobbyists putting money in their pocket. We change the tax code, we eliminate the lobbyists, we eliminate the IRS, all tax payments of 10% flat go directly to the Treasury Department. You call in the tax hotline, say, how much do I owe this year? There's only one answer. You don't have to pay a staff of 800 people to answer phone lines for 300 million people that they never answer anyway, saying this percent or that percent. It's 10%. The website's simplified, 10%. Let's bandwidth, let's server space. It all saves money. All of it saves money if we cut taxes. It's the law of economics. It's just the way things work. I wish I had an answer that said, no, it works better this way. But we've proven through history with Marx, with Lenin, with Stalin, with Pol Pot, with Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un and Mao and Mugabe and the oppressive apartheid government of South Africa. We've seen it happen again and again and again. Communism, socialism, or that quasi-democracy, socialism stuff that's toppling in Europe right now, that's toppling Greece, toppling Spain, toppling France. That's what we have in place, and we are on a fast track to it if we don't change something now. It's important that we be aware of these issues and hold our representatives accountable. Bottom line.
Bottom line right there. Yes, we can get things changed. We can get it changed by changing our tax rates. We can get it changed by freeing up entrepreneuring middle class to get out and be able to work for not only an employer but also for themselves. We can create jobs. We can end the masses. They're willing laborers wanting to work but can't because there's not jobs there, because companies can't afford to create the job for them to have. And minimum wage, that's probably another issue that I think we're going to have to dive into at another time.
It's a very deep issue.
I think there's a lot of things that need to go in there, but I think from what we can go out of this one is that minimum wage as it stands right now, it's doing its job, it's doing work. There's probably a better way to run it, but as for now today, it's doing its thing. We're going to leave it at that though. But once all these things work together, we as a whole can move forward, not just those with or just those without, but we as a society, we as a republic, we as citizens can move forward.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
It's a large task. It seems daunting, but that's why this phrase says the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. This is John, and this has been Mike.
Mike.
Thank you for listening.